Hey folks, what's going on? My name is Scott Schertzen from StreamPug Soccer, and joining me today, writer for The Athletic, also part of Kickbase USA, Mr. Favian Renkel, who's going to be talking a little bit about the upcoming MLS season right now, giving his knowledge, giving his insight, and giving that charisma and poise, talking about LAFC, Inter Miami, NYCFC, and maybe we'll even throw in a couple of teams that don't get a lot of attention, maybe Colorado, maybe Sporting KC. I don't know. We're going to figure it out as we go along. But anyway, sir, how the heck are you?
No, I'm doing awesome. I mean, I'm very grateful to be on the show.
Grateful to have you.
It was a really nice DM. No, it was cool. I love to be on shows, and now I'm in New York, so I gotta spread the love a little bit more to the East Coast guys.
There you go. I was how you adapting to it over here?
Oh, honestly, not too bad. I honestly thought it would be a hard of a transition, but since I'm from the Bay Area, San Francisco area, so it's truly it's truly not too different, to be honest. Of course, Manhattan, the city is the city, right? So very similar to San Francisco, where the city is proper, and then Brooklyn, I don't feel as that big of a city. If you guys are familiar with the Bay Area, Brooklyn to me reminds me a lot of San Jose.
Okay.
So they do have their big city kind of aspirations, but there's a lot of kind of slowerness compared to the big city like San Francisco or Manhattan, for example. But no, it's been really easy. It's one thing I've noticed: gas is cheaper and food is cheaper. So it's like, is this the most expensive place in the world? I think
where you go inside New York City, but yeah, it can be.
Yeah.
Like I said, you're in Brooklyn at this point where it is at least a little bit less expensive. But we're finding on this side for a lot of people in Brooklyn and Queens, they're coming out to where we are in Jersey is less expensive, but still public transit, so they can call themselves New Yorkers. So
right.
But all right. So welcome to the East Coast. Enjoy the weather. May it not snow. But in this case, let's start in this. I figure we'll start in California, where we're talking originally. LAFC right now has a lot of question marks. Steve Cherundolo retired, and rightfully so. The man has earned every right to call it, if he wants to. But Mark Santos came in. Give me your thoughts on him. Give me your thoughts on the team. Son's first full year will be coming up at this point, too, which I think is a big deal. As West Coast Messi, I think we can almost call him in some ways. But give me your thoughts on that team right now.
Yeah, look, I'm going to say this. I think this offseason's been a bit underwhelming for them. I think with the player like Son, you need to have, co-captains, and you need to have guys who go with him. Yes, you have Denis Bouanga, and they're going to kill it, both of them together. But you're going to need to add some crazier pieces, in my opinion, to kind of keep everybody happy. Now, maybe they're taking a stance. Well, we got Son in middle of the season last year. The calendar change isn't there yet. Possibly we can bring in another big guy after this World Cup. And I think a lot of teams are possibly poising themselves to get a guy after the World Cup, right? Because I don't think there's a player that has World Cup aspirations that would come to MLS before the tournament, maybe about 4 or 5 months, because it might jeopardize their spot in the rosters. I love MLS, and everybody here loves MLS, but that's just the reality of it, right? We're still viewed as a sub league, right?
Second tier, you can call it, Triple A soccer on a worldwide stage.
Yeah. So I think LAFC, when you look at it, man, this is really underwhelming. Hiring Mark Dos Santos, I think, is something they possibly could have done last year. I thought, because they were going to do this extravagant search, right? Maybe treat Steve Cherundolo. Yes, he was able to kind of ride out that contract that he had, and he got the respect that many people wanted to, ride out that season. But in a way, he was kind of a lame duck, right? You could easily have gave the job to the interim head coach, Mark Dos Santos, and see what you would have had in that year. Instead, now you have a full season of Son with another coach that possibly is not going to cut it for LAFC, right? And we're talking about LAFC here, right? This is supposed to be the favorite to combat against Inter Miami, right? So this is something where it's a bit underwhelming, especially when you see everything that Miami's doing, that's for sure.
Actually, yeah, it makes sense in this case. But if you look at it also, and this is what happens a lot of times when a player comes to MLS and the schedule, and we may talk a little bit about the change of the schedule upcoming, because I'm intrigued to get your thoughts there too. But the adjustment to have to deal with a different schedule. Lionel Messi, when he came over to Inter Miami in the middle of the season, he had hamstring issues because it went out of his regular schedule. He adapted eventually. Hannes Wolf talked a lot last year about coming over and adapting to the MLS schedule. Now that Son has had the opportunity to have an offseason, set himself into a groove, what do you think we can expect from him getting a full season, though?
Yeah, honestly, Messi is going to be a different animal this year, and I think it's because we saw a little. It's funny to say this about one of the best players that ever played a game, but we saw little bright spots in that playoff run of what this team can look like this next season, right? You're going to have to replace Jordi Alba and Sergio Busquets, two legends in the game, right? But once they do that, man, this team could be firing on all cylinders. Tadeo Allende might become the Robbie Keane of today, right? We're talking about this guy who was relatively unknown, now has the most goals in a playoff run and is here for more next season and already has that chemistry with Solvetti and Messi. Yeah, no, I think this Miami team is going to – I say this every year, but they're going to break records and they're going to win silverware. And I think with Suarez understanding that his life now is on the bench and him, getting a suspension to finally accept it is kind of the best of both worlds, right? So – no, I think this Miami team is just going to run rampant. I mean, I like the other teams in the East. I like Nashville. I like Cincinnati always. But I think when push comes to shove for Messi in Miami, I don't find any team beating them unless they're on the West Coast.
And, in this case here also, what's going to happen, this is a long season. So you got to pace yourself with the season. We're already back into training camp at this point. Amazingly, 6 weeks later after the MLS Cup is over, we're back in training camp. So you might see an Inter Miami team that might be hovering for a little while, where they might be 6th or 7th. And every writer is going to be like, is this team done? I asked it last year too. Where the team kind of struggled a little bit, and then they knew when to turn it on. And if you've ever watched Lionel Messi, he's similar, where he just kind of cruises, he's casual, walk in the park, and then bam, just like that. He pops in when you take your eyes off him.
Right.
That's where Messi's strength is. He knows when to turn it on and when to turn it off. And it was one of the weirdest things when I watched it the first time. But when you talked about Tadeo Allende, what was interesting about this also, and his strength is the fact that he doesn't have to be the guy. He can sit there when basically they're in the mix zone. If anybody's in the locker room, they're talking to the other players on there. They'll get Messi if they can.
Well, I mean, if they let us, right?
I know. That's why I threw the locker room thing. And obviously with Messi, it's a little different because the rules are different. But he's allowed to be under the radar a little bit. And that's where I think is also special for someone like him, that he doesn't have to be the guy, that you have someone like Lionel Messi who can handle the pressures of being the face of, honestly, soccer in general around the world. Right. And for a lot of the other players, they can kind of just ride underneath a little bit, play to their skills, and not have to constantly answer questions. And I think that's the big win, where you see what he did last year very quietly. And we use the word quietly. But I think even if he has that kind of a year this year, conversation is still going to be on Messi.
Yeah, look, the conversation's always going to be on Ted unless you want it, or unless something else happens with Son, right? Like the conversation is always going to be about Messi. I completely agree with you. I think Allende is a gem when the pressure's not on him. It's almost, if you guys are basketball fans, it really reminds me of Wiggins when he played for the Warriors, right? He was a great piece to that championship team. Now, could he do it alone? I'm not sure, right? But during that run when he won with Steph Curry, I believe he became a very, very big asset for that team, just like Tadeo Allende for this Inter Miami team. And I think every superstar needs those kind of characters around them to help them really lift up a cup. And we saw that last year with LAFC. Now, I don't know if LAFC has that. We saw it last year with the MLS Cup run for Inter Miami. I'm not sure if LAFC has that this year, because the guys they brought in, Schaffelberg is a great, in my opinion, I like it. I like the trade. You didn't pay too much for him. I thought it's a pretty good number, but he's injured, right? He got injured. And that's the very, very unfortunate thing about soccer, man. You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So, and then they bring in a guy like Tyler Boyd, right? Another Nashville guy. So a little bit underwhelming if you're LAFC, but I'm assuming they're saving that spot for after the World Cup to possibly bring in another European star like a Griezmann, like these players that have been linked with coming to MLS in the past, right? There's probably going to be Lewandowski coming. So it's interesting to see what players are going to be linked throughout the World Cup and after. But no, I think that Inter Miami is going to be a different beast this year. I think since they won it last year without having to be number one, I don't think they're going to care at all, honestly. I think maybe they're going to want to be in the upper echelon, like the top four, so they can have some home field advantage. But I really think they're going to throw all their chips into CCC. They're going to throw all their chips into any tournament that they can lift, right? So Leagues Cup even. I think they're going to be wanting to be the first club to ever lift 2 of those. And I think that's honestly the easiest path to CCC qualifications. So I think they're going to take that chance as well. And then they're not in the U.S. Olympic Cup, but if they were, I bet you they definitely would take that as a priority to get another piece of silverware in their cabinet already.
You know, you mentioned this. I'm going to switch gears a little bit because I'm intrigued to get your thought here too. Speaking of Supporter Shield, Philadelphia Union have pretty much blown up their team in the offseason. Yeah. You know, I can't remember the last time I saw a Supporter Shield team do something like this, almost Miami Marlin level. And just, I mean, they're going to still be competitive. They're not going to be the Marlins of, like, say, 98. But it's amazing to me to watch all those pieces just disappear. You know, Glesnes, yeah. So I just wanted to get, what do you think is the expected of that team? And do you think the Supporter Shield can hurt a team? 2-part question.
Yeah, look, the Union. If you're a Union fan, if you like that Duke team, you already know this is your team, right? You got rid of Carranza. You got rid of Kai Wagner now. You got rid of Glesnes. You're a selling team. You got rid of McGlynn.
Last year, yeah.
Right, you got rid of Aronson. This is your team. You're going to find the gems through your academy. They have Kevin Sullivan. They have Quinn Sullivan. They still have some pieces that can be gems, right? But you knew the Kai Wagner stuff was coming as of years now. I mean, that was something where he's been linked to not being on the Union for a long time, and it looks like he's actually already succeeding over at Birmingham. I'm actually shocked that Andre Blake is still on this team, because you would think that somebody would want his talent somewhere. But
Rick's available too.
Right. And then Glesnes, he was on a bit of, I mean, stats wise, he wasn't on a decline, but Father Time waits for nobody, like it's going to come. And I think the Union way is to definitely cash out while you still can. Now, I grew up following the Earthquakes, and then I eventually became an Earthquakes reporter. The Earthquakes, on the other hand, are a team that don't cash in when they should. And it's almost like if the Quakes could be more of a Philadelphia Union kind of mentality, where they sell it when it's hot and make sure that they get profits to kind of get other gems, I think a lot of the fan base in the Bay Area would be happy, So it's almost like the Union as a company or as a franchise or as a team, they have an identity and they're sticking to it. Now, if you're a fan of that team, I feel like you already know that going into every year, and you're almost happy to see those guys succeed in other systems as well. And but let's see what they do with the money on the coming back in. And they're always competitive. I really don't know how they do it. Always competitive. They're going to be competitive.
They did better last year than I think all of us expected. We figured low-end playoff, 7th, 8th, 9th. But yeah, no, I mean, that was a good season. So I'm sorry I cut you off. I apologize.
No. I'm the first to tell you that I picked them to be like the 13th, 12th team last year.
You were not alone there, sir.
Yeah, they proved me way wrong. I feel like they had my picture up, and I was like, enemy number one, So no, I think they did a great job, and I think Quinn and Kevin are both going to take steps up this year. And if they didn't think that, I don't think they would get rid of some of their guys. So yes, they have kind of pockets to fill, but if anyone's going to fill them with good talent within MLS or within their academy, I think it's the Union. And how FC Dallas was that youth academy gold standard, I think the Union are starting to become that as well.
You look at Bradley Cornell, his first year versus his second year would say St. Louis. And you kind of question in this case here, is he going to have a sophomore layoff? I don't know.
Yeah. I think it's obvious, right? I mean, it's so hard to win the Supporters Shield back to back.
I'm not even talking that, but I'm talking like even playoffs. I mean, if you look, like I said, if St. Louis was a darling team their first year, like San Diego last year. Yeah. So, and then you saw the drop off, and obviously he was gone. With the Philadelphia Union, could that happen there? And could history repeat itself for Cornell?
Yeah, honestly, it's a good question. The St. Louis kind of darling run, I give a lot of credit to them being an MLS Next Pro the year prior before the
1 year
MLS
in. 1 year training.
Yeah, because to be honest, they knew the travel. All those European guys they brought in, their visa situation was done, was ready to go. They understood the travel because they had to travel for MLS Next Pro. So honestly, that to me is a little bit of a fluke. Now, San Diego did last year, but San Diego also had an MVP caliber type player, right?
Yes.
So they also had one of the best Mexican players to ever play in MLS, right? So even though he's benched, but still, they had a great team. They had a great system. They were bought in. Now, can Bradley Carnell do it again this season? I hope so, because even if you're a USMNT fan or somewhat of a watcher of the United States men's, you're looking at these Sullivan brothers and you're thinking, these guys could possibly, be on their way to Europe this next season and become something for this national team, because we're always short of 10s for the national team. That's for sure.
Yeah. Actually, there's talk about, obviously the Sullivan brothers for 2030 too, but, well, 2030 as well, I should say. But yeah, I mean, the having the two of them there, and there's obviously, like you said, talk about Europe. So that's going to be more of a when versus an if, as long as they stay healthy. But again, we talked about it earlier. That's the nature of this league. Right. You groom the players so they go elsewhere, and that's where it's kind of just the nature of this. But it's curious also, and I'm switching gears again on you on this one, but with the schedule change for next year, where it's going to be a little bit closer to Europe. Not just that, but also the 14-game mini schedule. I don't know. I've been trying to explain this to certain people, and no one seems to get it, but I'm going to take a shot at it anyway. It feels to me, the 14-game schedule that they have at the beginning of the season reminds me of like the MLB season during COVID, where you had that 60-game schedule. Every game has a bigger impact, and people were just like, huh? So I'm hoping you at least get the reference of what I'm talking about here.
Yeah. No, the bubble season, honestly, I loved MLS's back. Let's take it back to MLS,
That's true. That's
I loved how every single game mattered, right? The biggest gripe about modern sports, right, is that there's too many games. And it's so funny because we have so many riches here in 2026 that we're complaining about too much of something, right? But I do think this little short rush of a season is going to be a fun one. I think, at least for where I'm working, and everywhere where I'm working, it's going to be something that is going to be so eye-catching. I think it's awesome that it's going to happen with the World Cup somewhere around, So I think soccer's exponentially going to just grow, right? So, no, it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. It's like MLS is back 2.0, and I'm all for it.
And what's funny about it also is you might get one of those sleeper teams that typically struggles, like a Toronto, Montreal. I mean, I'll throw Atlanta into the mix, but I think last year was more of a fluke than anything. But, these teams that suddenly get hot at the right time, and you might get a sleeper like sneaking through. I'm kind of excited by that.
Yeah, take a look at Leagues Cup. Look at the Mexican teams that make it through, right? You get sleepers in there because they think it's an easy way of qualifying for the CONCACAF. And you get like teams like Puebla and Necaxa that make it to the next round when it's usually, the Mexican powerhouses. So, yeah, exactly. You might be able to get some dark horses in there.
I am a little concerned about the players with the schedule. I mean, they're probably going to do some roster adjustments and everything like that. But that's an almost close to a year and a half straight. And you have to worry about injury concerns on something like this. And like I said, I'm sure the teams are already preparing for this. They're probably going to allow an increased roster or something along those lines to make sure that doesn't happen. But you have to wonder about this because that's going to be pretty much from January all the way through next May. So what is that, 16 months roughly? From training camp all the way to the MLS Cup final.
Yeah, so if the MLS Cup final – yeah, that's kind of crazy for teams like Miami or if you're expecting to be in the MLS Cup final, right? The MLS Cup final would probably be around December, maybe December 7th or something like that. And then you start up again in January. That would be insane.
The same turnaround you pretty much have now. So.
Yeah, but I would expect, to be honest, big guys like Son or Messi to take maybe a couple of games off in the beginning of the season. I think that is going to be pretty obvious. So if you're listening to this now, don't buy any tickets for January. Not yet, guys.
Well, in January, obviously, you've got the chance to see Etihad Park in 2027 too. You're local now to Queens, so it's not that bad for you.
Yeah, exactly.
But take me through a little bit, just in this case. So you like? Let me ask you this: do you like the schedule change? You think it's necessary?
Look, yeah, honestly, I'm not the biggest fan of it in a sense where I like the schedule that MLS had now, and
Okay.
I think the playoffs needs to be fixed.
Mm-hmm.
I like not competing with the NFL.
Yeah, we had
I'm thinking purely as an American, like as an
mm-hmm.
American guy. I do like how the season is set up now. I thought having some primetime games for the 4th of July was very fun. I was there for those Rose Bowl games with the Galaxy and the LAFC, with Ricky Pooch putting his a rose in his mouth, things like that. Like I'm a sucker for these holiday games,
Mm-hmm.
and I think 4th of July was one that nobody had, right? So it was kind of a perfect primetime match for MLS. Now, let's put my business hat on now. Let's put my franchise hat on. MLS. This turns into an MLS logo. I get it. If you want to compete with the European leagues, you have to attract the best talent. And it's so hard to attract the best talent when you're halfway through a season or you're buying a guy at a premium because it's not at the, it's in the middle of their season. So I get it. I totally get it. I get why they're doing this change. I think it's time that we don't have any games during FIFA breaks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You ever explain to a non-soccer fan that no, MLS is still on right now while USA's playing? That's so weird.
The amount of flack that MLS also got for the breaks that happened, during playoffs last year. Philadelphia. It cost Philadelphia, I think, having that 3-week break. You have rusty teams. Even
Right.
a 2-week break, takes the players off their rhythm. And you saw it back in 2021 with the Revolution because they had the supporter shield. They set a record for most points. Bam, they got knocked out. And it's that rust that's causing a problem. And I know I saw a lot of comments in Europe, and you probably saw it too, asking why the hell is that happening? But at least that's a question they don't have to answer anymore. Now, I do see your point there. You see, we like holiday sports. Look at how Christmas NFL has actually become a thing.
Right.
Netflix is pulling this thing, day after Thanksgiving. Not just Thanksgiving football, but day after Thanksgiving. So we're a sucker for these sort of things. So you do lose that a little bit short of, I don't know, Labor Day, and small little minor holidays. But what it is, I think, necessary with something like this is you have the ability to not have to compete with the NFL. American football is God here. American football is God here. It's college, even high school, and competing with that NBA, the NHL, having to compete with all of that, you get overshadowed. I remember there was one of the MLS Cup finals, maybe 2021, was preempted on ABC because there was a women's college basketball game that went into overtime. So they held the start of the game against the Portland Timbers until the college basketball game concluded and then switched right over. So that shows you where MLS stood 4 or 5 years ago. Yeah. But I think playing it in May, the baseball season's a month and a half underway. People are, the excitement of baseball is kind of worn down. It's more of a routine. You have the UFL at this point, which draws decent numbers depending on where it is. St. Louis has pretty solid typically, but you don't have near as much competition for your MLS Cup final. And I think that's the biggest key there, that they can't really compete. And they know that. So they're like, we're going to come up with something a little different, and try to line. I think it was the best solution they had. Not a great solution, but the best solution available.
Yeah, no, I think it's the best solution possible as this game is growing stateside. Mm-hmm. Now, we're all going to talk about this like, I was pre-schedule change, I watched MLS pre-schedule change, you're just starting now, that's nice, no, but I think it's the best thing possible for the league. My thing was, I saw Don Garber speak at the last State of the Union, and it looks like they want to compete with the biggest leagues in the world and become a true powerhouse in terms of, being in the global soccer landscape. Before, it was surviving in the American landscape. Mm-hmm. And now with this Apple TV deal and the streaming deals that could be coming for this league in the future, you don't really have to worry about competing with American sports leagues, in my opinion, because if you look at the numbers, people show up to events like soccer games because, one, they're affordable, they're family friendly, and they're fun. It doesn't necessarily, even if it's competing, it's still putting up pretty big numbers in attendance. Now the streaming stuff, I think it gives you a little more emphasis and being a little more bullish on possibly we can actually not be so American at this now. We can be a little bit more like the world in this sense where we don't have to worry about competing with other sports because we're not even competing with airtime now that we have Apple TV. And we can truly help out our teams, get cheaper talent because you're not paying a premium anymore. And you're also selling more guys because they're lining up the same transfer windows as the teams in Europe and South America. So, no, I think this is a perfect thing. As an American, I'm going to miss the pre-schedule change days, but I think it's right for the growth of the league and truly the right direction. I wanted to say this, though, about your college football analogy. I always say this about college football. If you watch college football, you should watch MLS because college football isn't the best football in the world. MLS isn't the best soccer in the world. What are you doing? You should watch, if you like soccer, you should watch MLS too. So I just wanted to say that because whenever someone brings up college football, I'm like, well, look at them. They're thriving in the U.S., not being the best league. Let's try to get MLS feeling that way.
The difference, though, in this case, and this is where I think the NWSL does get it, is the fact that college football is available anywhere. Where you can put it on is very. I mean, I've talked to a lot of people that soccer and the NFL or American football, we'll call it, are very much channel surf and stop, things. So, I mean, I've heard the analogy from some people, that Thursday night football, who's playing? Don't know, but it's on. If you don't get that luxury as much with the Apple TV deal, where if a game is on between, say, Minnesota and RSL, you're not tuning in unless you're local to it. And what I think the league, and they're trying to do this, and and feel free to tell me I'm wrong, by all means, 1,000%. But I think the league is starting to realize maybe the Apple TV deal isn't the best thing long term because you're seeing what NWSL or even what USL has been able to do as just a channel surf type of league here. And I think the Apple TV deal, while I was definitely in favor of it initially, I'm not as much now as I used to be. And now that the opt-out is now 2029, I think some people are starting to see it as maybe good for the moment, but maybe not so much now.
Yeah, honestly, to me, I was just in the same boat as you. The Apple TV was something very good. When it first came out, we were the first league to do it. We were the first kind of sports in the United States to do it. That TV deal got saved by Messi coming. If Messi didn't come, man, would this have been a different...
Messi didn't play in the MLS Cup final this year.
Right. It would have been a completely different story. Now, I agree with you. I think everybody is noticing that it's not doing as well as they thought it was going to do. So they got rid of the paywall. And I think that's something that everybody was clamoring for. I remember 2 years ago, I was clamoring, well, why don't we have any primetime games, And now we got Sunday night soccer. So, no, I think what's nice about Apple is they're actually kind of listening. I think even though the changes aren't happening as fast as we all wanted, I think with the Apple deal, I think they're doing their best with listening to what the fans want. And I think in the best world scenario for MLS, if there's another suitor that comes in for this type of streaming deal, like an Amazon or a Netflix, maybe that pushes Apple to, put a little bit more eggs in this basket of MLS, right? So I think they're still going to stay on a streaming platform when 2029 comes around, but I think there's going to be different suitors for that. But I remembered something I wanted to say about that schedule change real quick. I wish they would have done it after the World Cup instead of waiting that season. And I wish they would have done an extra DP for after the World Cup, which would have made so much sense because there's so many European stars that are going to want to stay in the United States playing soccer because they're not going to reach the next World Cup. So there's a lot of missed opportunities.
They might have tried to, just couldn't get it done in time because that is not an easy switch to do. I think they might have just ran out of time.
And with MLS, the theme has been they haven't capitalized to their fullest ability, and that lands with the Apple TV deal.
And it's funny because you mentioned, I get that 100%. And I think a lot of people feel that exact same way, that you would be able to just end on World Cup and then immediately piggyback right into the regular season and just springboard from one to the next.
Yeah.
So, but I think in the end of the day, they just couldn't get it done in time, and we have what we have. So, better late than never, I suppose. But if you talk about the Apple TV deal, Apple's pretty much got what they needed out of this. They wanted to showcase to the world, this is what we're able to do. And to its credit, Apple TV's streaming is pretty darn good. Their broadcast team, I think, is a little weak because they're a lot of times broadcasting remote. That's another thing. But from an actual visual technical standpoint, I mean, it is very top tier. So you could see Apple probably getting the World Cup. I'm sorry, not World Cup, World Series or something like that down the line. The consumer would be pissed off as hell, but that's the way the world's going anyway. But MLS, I can see it going into Netflix. I think that'd be a good move because everybody's got it.
Yeah, Netflix would be crazy. Like, that's the ideal get, right? Netflix would be something else, but Amazon's another one. I mean, you were talking
anything that's mainstream that everybody has.
You were talking about Thursday night football. Thursday night football, everybody watches because it's on Amazon, right? So that's another one. It's like, man, what if MLS landed on Netflix or Amazon? That would be an ideal scenario for MLS, right? And I still think you want to keep it on streaming because your average demographic is a little younger, right? You don't have, and you already went this way, right? It would be bad to pivot back, in my opinion.
And for what it's worth, actually seeing Al Michaels on Amazon Prime is still weird to me. I cannot get used to that. I struggle. 82 years old. I still can't adapt to that. But yeah, I mean, I think they're getting more things right than incorrect, and that's the biggest thing. They're doing what they need to. Between Don Garber, between Lamar Hunt, Bob Craig, this league has grown tremendously over the course of the last 30 years. Back in 1994, when the World Cup was here, people were like, "Oh, cool, soccer," That's that sport where nobody scores goals or nobody scores points, right? Because it was one of those things that everybody played when they were a kid. I did, but then there was no league beyond that. And to watch it become as mainstream as it is, where you see Atlanta, Charlotte drawing, I mean, hell, they've drawn 70,000.
Yeah.
I mean, they outdrew, Charlotte outdrew the Carolina Panthers in a couple of weeks there. How insane is that from a week 1 to week 2? But that's the nature of this league because it's one of those sports that's geared more towards younger people. Football, I think, has some problems because it's so big. There's so many ACLs and so many concussion protocols. I mean, Jackson Dart was in that tent, I think, 5 or 10 times this year, and he's only a rookie. So soccer is one of those sports where you don't have to basically be, 6'5", 285. You can just be, 5'10", 150 or whatever. And it's low cost, which I think a lot of families are open to in this case here, But
low cost though to play, right? But not to be in a youth
No, but I'm saying,
league. So
I'm saying if you're a kid that's 10 or 12 years old, if it's football, you got to get the padding, got to get the In this case, it's shorts, whatever color T-shirt. Me was the green team when I was a kid, and cleats if you got them, and then you just go, and that's where I think soccer has such a growth potential here. And it's curious to see what the next 10 years are going to be like, because not just here, but also other countries you wouldn't expect. Japan. I mean, my God, if you ever go to an F. Marino's game or anything like that, the fans are nuts in a very positive, loving way, but nuts.
And Japan's actually a very curious case because they have the biggest demographic for female fans, which is something that a lot of pro men's leagues here in the States don't have. But in Japan, they do. So it's. Have you ever been to an NWSL game? I mean,
yes.
They scream to the top of their lungs, and it's such an intimidating place to play in because the loudest game I've ever been to was a women's USWNT game, and that was so loud. I was so shocked. I was like, "Whoa, this would be so hard to play in." But yeah, no, it's something to understand. I mean, the technical play and probably the systems in Japan is going to change too eventually when they get maybe a World Cup over there again in the near future, right? So, but here in the States, what I can tell you, what I'm seeing as a creator, the street soccer scene here is blowing up overnight. I'm talking to 5 or 6 companies that are making these rooftop fields. They're making these small pitches to play, futsal, to play 5-on-5 everywhere in the country. This next generation, after the generation that's gonna, that saw the '94 World Cup, this next one, if you aren't playing soccer as a kid the next 10 years, that's going to be weird. And it's not going to stop there. It's going to be like, wait, do you want to? You know how like there's in the past there was like, yeah, let's go play pickup softball.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be pickup futsal. There's going to be so much pickup soccer in the next 10 years. If you're, let's say, in the 15 to 25 range, that it's going to be completely normal in your kind of day to day. And that's my big kind of prediction for the next 10 years. I think for 94, it really instilled, the institutions. So MLS, the NWSL eventually, the USMNT, the USWNT. And I think the next kind of wave is going to be that street soccer, the pickup scene. Everybody's going to have cleats on them, even if they aren't the soccer player.
And you look at basically what's happening with the USL springing up all over the place.
Right.
I mean, even here in Jersey, I mean, the Cosmos came back to Patterson. So that's starting up this year. But Sacramento, I think, was pulling in 10,000 fans a game. Pittsburgh was pulling in 5,000 to 6,000 fans. So obviously they're not getting MLS or NFL or anything like that. Say that what you want. But for a second-tier U.S. soccer league, they were pulling in solid numbers. And again, I think it's just the fact that there's such a local feel to some of these guys where everybody kind of has a USL team now in their neighborhood. Maine has one now with the Hearts of Pine.
Right, right.
For years, for decades, the only team that they had up there was like the Maine Black Bears, the college team. And now they got a USL team, and they're pulling in good numbers, and the fans are excited because Maine has something for their own that they never had before. And that's the beauty of what's going on with that.
No, I love it. I love soccer on all levels in the U.S. I got to give a shout out to Sacramento because I've never been to a stadium that they jam pack. I mean, I covered the U.S. Open Cup, and man, that place is rocking to play those U.S. Open Cup games, and something that it's very hard for the Earthquakes. I even joked around and I said, man, these guys have more than the Earthquakes sometimes because the Earthquakes sometimes they're not at 12,000, they're at like 9,000, and Sacramento for the U.S. Open Cup games get at least 13 to 14, right? So it's interesting to see, but no, I shout out to the USL and getting into all these little pockets, and I think this is a perfect kind of scenario for what is a closed system, right? You're getting all these USL teams in places that don't have experience of top tier soccer, but hey, it's still good soccer, and that's why I'm going to bring this back to the U.S. Open Cup. We need a tournament like this to have those fans or give those fans an opportunity to see how their team plays against the top dogs in MLS.
Sure.
Now, I work for Leagues Cup. I know Leagues Cup is necessary, in my opinion, to have that Mexican league kind of affiliated with the USA League and trying to get all those Mexican American fans. Now, the one thing I'm not too excited that Don Garber made it so is taking the teams out of it. Now, you give the teams the opportunity to play their stars. You don't have to play their stars. They can bring up guys just like in the FA Cup. They bring in guys from the second team. They bring in young guys. They give minutes to guys who usually don't. But why do you have to take the whole team out? Like that, in my opinion, I don't think that's the right way to do it. I think you should definitely let teams make their own choice. You should let players make their own choice instead of forcing it upon them. And I think there is a world where I see Leagues Cup and the U.S. Open Cup living. I see a world where you can let your teams make those decisions. If they want to bring up the whole Inter Miami 2 team, then let them do it. Yeah,
I mean there's a lot of moving parts with all this, so it's questions that cannot definitely be answered today. Even when you look at things like international duty, X, Y, and Z player like Matt Freese, every time he's international duty, he's gone. Tomas Romero comes in or any of these other guys, and that's a struggle that I think some of the teams have as well when they're fighting for their own playoff position and seeding. You lose 2 or 3 or 4 of your best guys. Look what happened, with Alonso Martinez with NYCFC. I mean, that gave me Edwin Diaz with the Mets 5 in the World Baseball Classic. Because it was something that he had an injury that wasn't even part of the NYCFC roster, but has messed up that team until May, June, or July of this year, 15 some odd games this season because of the international, the roster part of it. Now, I'm not decrying him one iota for doing it. By God, you play for your country if you got the chance and you want to do it. But it's still one of those things that, the fly on the wall basically in Manhattan when, NYCFC got word that Alonso was down with an ACL. I mean, I've seen some of their anger sometimes. But yeah, I mean, that's a concern of mine personally.
Yeah. It's tough because this is kind of like the Ricky Pooch
Yeah.
situation for the Galaxy last year, right? But
Also,
he did get hurt in a Galaxy game, but he got hurt so late in the season.
mhm.
He going to come back this season, or do you shut him down so that you can have that roster spot and designated player, because they do have a season-ending injury list that they can put this player on? Do you rush him back so that you can not use that mechanism, right?
Depends
So
where you
it's
stand, I think.
yeah,
I mean, they made
it's
good moves in the offseason. Sorry, I cut you off, but
yeah, no worries. It's truly, and a little bit of a tongue twister, or like a riddle there, because do you rush him back and then have the same fear? What's going to happen with Ricky?
mhm.
With Alonso, be out for 2 years.
Yeah,
So it's interesting.
in their prime too.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
I mean, LAFC overall, you can chalk up last year as being kind of an anomaly. I mean, they've been up and down a little bit, but they're 2 years removed from a cup. They made some good additions with Glesnes, Justin Hack. NYCFC fans, including my wife, are mourning the loss of Justin Hack over here in a big way because he was such a contributor, on and off the pitch. And I think it surprised a lot of people, myself included, that he took such a low deal. But the theory is he's testing himself on Europe. But while he's here, the Galaxy, even without Ricky, I think can be competitive and probably get fifth or sixth or even seventh this year at least, despite his loss, just because of the additions that they've made.
Yeah, look for the Galaxy to try to really fill Ricky's spot, because they're going to put him on that season-ending injury list this time around, and they get that whole DP slot available. So expect the Galaxy to be a player, and I think they're going to fill that spot with a good player, and I think they're going to be contending again for this West. That's not as tough as the East, right?
Yeah, I mean, the West is a little bit easier that way in that regard. Christian Benteke could have been a good addition, but he went, I believe, to Saudi Arabia. But that's surprised me a little bit that basically DC let him go, but he's getting a little older there.
Yeah, it's surprising that no MLS team really picked him up. But I mean, his family lives in Saudi, or Qatar. Yeah, his family lives somewhere in the Middle East over there, and it almost made sense, to get that last paycheck before
Sure,
it was all said and done, right? But yeah, no, an MLS team could have definitely used him, and it would have been fun to see.
I think actually I believe NYCFC did put an offer in for him, but if you want to be closer to family, I understand that one 100%. You see that with players, usually a lot of times the younger players. Monsef Bakrar was an example where he was just kind of struggling because he was away from home. Agostino Hayda with NYCFC also struggled in that area because he was, he played in South America and all that for a while, and then all of a sudden, bam, was just here in New York and had a hard time adapting. And you see that kind of the struggle with players like that. And I don't know. I mean, I'm disappointed because I always liked the guy. I like seeing him. I liked his aerial duel. I mean, nobody won aerial duels like Christian Benteke.
No, he was best.
So I'm going to miss him, but you know what? Respect top to bottom for that. A couple more things. Maybe we'll call it at this point. Do you have anything you wanted to add on any? We bounced around a heck of a lot here. Do you have anything you wanted to pick up on any of the other stuff?
No, I think we bounced around on a lot of things.
I know. It wasn't usually how I run these sort of things, but you know what? I couldn't help it.
No. It was a great conversation. I mean, I had a blast just bouncing around because we can talk MLS all day, and that's the beauty of it, right? My thing is, it's going to be an exciting season to see. I know people are saying this is not a rivalry, but this MLS MVP race is going to be insane. You're going to have Son, Messi. You might even have Bouanga thrown in there. You're going to have Dreyer, with the new contract in there. You're going to have the regular guys like Evander, Henny Mukhtar now with Christian Espinoza with him. You're going to have all these guys kind of competing for this MVP. And man, can they finally overcome this dragon that is Lionel Messi for the MVP? And that's something I'm keeping my eye on from match day one. I think that's going to be a crazy race for me.
You look at Evander's numbers, like the first, say 10 or 15 games of the season until he got acclimated over in Cincy. I think having a second season, I think is going to do really well because that trade surprised a lot of people. It surprised me personally. Yeah. So I think he's been able to adapt pretty well. And Cincy was my early season pick for representing the East, to be honest. After the loss they had with Columbus, it surprised me a little bit. I expected more out of them last season, so I'm figuring they're going to have that hunger again. Columbus, I mean, Wilfred Nancy may be available.
Yeah, I'm honestly thinking, what if they waited one more week, right? I mean, but they probably knew from Nancy that if he was going to get fired, they probably had that contact where he wasn't going to come back no matter what. Because I don't see a world where how it's going at Celtic, they don't at least send him a text, right?
Sure.
And it's going to be very interesting to see this crew team kind of with a new coach. I always thought it was going to be Laurent Courtois. He was under Nancy. He was going to come back and then basically kind of still have a Nancy-esque type of style of play, but maybe just a little bit different because he won that championship with that Crew 2 team, and basically under Nancy as well. So interesting hire. I mean, they brought Courtois in as an assistant, so maybe if it does go south, they can instantly throw Courtois in there as an interim. But yeah, man, it's going to be interesting to see how Columbus does this season. They still have some great players on that team, but who knows if they, let's see if Nancy goes somewhere else where he brings some Columbus guys with him.
Could be. Do you think Atlanta's going to rebound this year?
They have to.
I was going to say.
I think there's no way they don't a little bit, right? I mean, to me, Atlanta's the most puzzling team. I mean, they went out and spent $18 million on Latte Loth. They got Almiron back. I thought they were going to get Josef Martinez again, but they didn't. But they have Tata Martino now, and I've always been a big fan of Tata in MLS. I thought in MLS he's done a great job getting the most out of non-superstar-like players. I thought he did a great job in Miami when Messi wasn't available. He kept that team winning that Supporters' Shield and getting far in Leagues Cup without Messi. And everybody thought that team was just going to crumble. But guys like Campana stepped up. Guys like Suarez stepped up and made sure that team was still running on all cylinders without the best player in the world at the time. So I think Tata is going to get the most out of Almiron. I think he's going to get the most out of Latte Loth. Now, is Miranchuk still going to be a part of this team? It's something to really think about. I mean, if this summer transfer window comes and they're not cutting it, he's the first one to get the axe, unfortunately.
Probably, yeah. Well, that's usually how it works too. You can't. What's the old saying across sports? You can't fire the player.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But they're probably going to find a way to fill in that third DP with a player that's going to be able to produce more than Miranchuk, unfortunately.
Nice. Favian, I appreciate the time on this. Important question here. How can people get in touch with you and how can they read your stuff?
Yeah, you can find me at Favian Renkel on Twitter or X. And then you can also read my Uruguay work for The Athletic and the New York Times for the World Cup. And yeah, I'm going to be covering MLS with Kickbase. So if you're a fan of MLS, and I hope you are, if you're listening to this, definitely look out for what Kickbase has in store for you.
Love it. Appreciate the time, big time. I'd love to be able to talk to you again later on in the season. I'm trying to build a collab part of this where people like yourself, like Joe Tollison, Ted Ramey from San Jose, obviously you remember.
Yeah, Ted's awesome.
Todd's awesome. He was one of the first broadcaster guests we had. And we at the beginning of the season last year because there was hope in San Jose because San Jose's been a struggling town on two different sports for a long time.
Right.
The Sharks have not been great either for a long time there.
Right.
But yeah, we talked for a while, but I'm trying to build like a round table of something like this if I can do it. But yeah, but I appreciate the time, man. You're awesome. Thank you again. Anyway, I'm Scott Churchson from Stream Punk Soccer. Appreciate the time. Let us know in the comments, A, what you want us to talk about, B, who you want us to talk about is with, and C, what it is you want to talk about yourself. And if you want to do it yourself, I'm cool having, regular basically viewers on as guests too. We've done that before. Anyway, appreciate the time. Take care. Stay awesome.